Welcome to Fireside Chats. I am Magla Pillay, and today's topic is entitled Patience. If this is your problem or problem for you, do not feel alone, because a lot of us go through the day gritting our teeth waiting for something to be over. This series focuses on a variety of subjects covering spirituality. We look at the core of spirituality, and we ask you, the viewer, to ask what your relationship with God is and whether you can enjoy a more fulfilling and deeper one with Him. I'd like to introduce you to Sister Denise, who has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation for over 40 years. Sister Denise, thank you so much for joining us, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Patience. I can't tell you what a sore subject this is for me and for many people whom I know. Why is it that we feel entitled to do things at our own pace, to have things fall into our lap as and when we see them, rather than accepting life as it is?
I think that it's a sign that we have lost power. If I am trying to develop myself in terms of patience, it might be wiser for me to say, well, if patience is an indicator of power, let me focus on developing the powers, because then patience would be a natural byproduct of the presence of spiritual power. There are sayings about patience, and it is said that have patience, O man, your days of happiness are not far away. So patience also includes trust. I think when we become impatient, behind that feeling of impatience, there's also an anxiety that maybe something will go wrong if such and such doesn't happen right now, or it'll be lost, or something like this. And I think this is quite subconscious, and it is something that business people play on this weakness of other people. They say you must buy now because any time now it'll be no longer available, and people fall into this trap so easily that it's like it's a trick that works every time. But if you believe in patience, trust in the value of patience, the virtue of patience, then you will see through that trap and that trick, and you would, work on being patient. Observe that when you are feeling impatient, what you're also feeling is spiritually tired, spiritually exhausted, could be physically exhausted too. Whenever you're feeling really empowered, you always have more patience than when you're at the end of your rope,
Sister Denise, tell us, how does one get through a traffic jam without losing one's cool?
Well, you could
listen to music.
There's a lot of things you can do. One of the things you can think of is that your car is a mobile meditation room. So when you're in a traffic jam, that's an opportunity for you to have an hour's meditation, because there's nothing else you can do in a traffic jam except be in a traffic jam. So you might as well take advantage. And if you keep in your car some nice tapes, some classes, a few things that you can actually use when you find yourself in a traffic jam, which in the days of the big mega cities that we live in is almost inevitable.
If one has a problem in the patients department, your problem is much bigger than the traffic jam and the you losing your temper with someone who doesn't do something at the speed with which you'd want them to. It's much bigger picture than that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's just a symptom of the fact that you haven't paid attention to your own spirit. And it's a sign that you need to, because when you're weak, you do wrong things, regrettable things, things that you have to pay for, and you have to come to terms with the fact that if you're weak, you better do something to get yourself strong. Take power.
So, Sister Denise, when you're meditating, you don't sit with the aim of I'd like to become more patient, do you? You develop other powers, and patience is a gift that comes with it.
Well, you
because
could.
because it is said that anger is a secondary emotion. Is patience a secondary problem?
Well, patience is not a secondary problem. Patience is a secondary benefit from...
Sorry. Okay. Scratch the answer as well. Is impatience a secondary problem?
Definitely.
Okay, then what is at the core? What is the primary malfunction within the human psyche that causes one to be impatient?
Well, the soul is low on energy. And when the soul is low on energy, it's going to manifest. And it manifests in irritation and impatience. And you will express that to your loved ones, your colleagues, whatever, and they will, they will charge you for it. So it is incumbent upon you to not let yourself get that much low on energy. It's a responsibility. Because if you get impatient and you get irritable, it's because you haven't been paying attention
to yourself,
to your spiritual development,
Wanting to increase your energy and actually achieving it is two different things. What is it that you do within your meditative practice that brings an accumulation of energy? The reason I'm asking this is we all have patterns in our personalities, they're like footpaths. Okay, so if I have a footpath of impatience, unless I do something drastic, I will return to that behavior when I'm under duress, when I'm under stress.
Well,
okay?
These are what we call sanskaras, these footpaths, these grooves, you see.
Yes.
And it's only possible for you to be impatient or fall back to those old grooves when the soul is low on power. So you have a responsibility to make sure that you don't go low on power. And that means you have to pay attention. You have to discipline your time. You have to just not allow yourself to do something which makes you get weak. And that kind of personal discipline, not everybody realizes the value of it, or many people, they say, well, I can't. And I always tell people there's nothing like can't. Change that, call it won't. I'm not willing to. That's much more honest. Of course you can. Are you willing to? And are you willing to means what is the condition of your willpower? Because if you're low on power, you're also low on willpower. And so then that means you are faced with the fact that you're weak because you allowed yourself to become weak. And no matter which way you look at it, it comes back to I am responsible for making sure that I meditate sufficiently to keep my energy up.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't do that, there's going to be something that will happen to embarrass me or something like this, and can't escape it, can't avoid it.
Yes, Denise, what I've seen is that impatience is an escalating vice, an escalating weakness. So if I'm impatient this much today, there's this thing within the human psyche that says, I want what I want and I want it now. Okay, so my expectations of myself is unrealistic, my expectations of other people are unrealistic, and so I tend to get more and more and more worse in that department.
That's because your energy is getting more and more expended and you're not doing anything about it. That's it.
You mentioned then what's the core problem. Is there anything as far as my behavior is concerned that I have to modify? Because this, like all things, has an internal element and an external element. How do I modify my behavior and teach myself that this is not the right way to be?
Well, you have to change your priorities.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, you have certain priorities, whether you have realized it or not, but you need to really look at what do you do, because then you'll see what priorities you have assigned. And if you see that the way that you're setting your priorities is causing a lot of problems, well, you need to change your priorities. And if your highest priority is I must take responsibility for keeping myself at a high level of internal power, and that is more important than other things like deadlines or whatever. You see, you change your priorities, but maybe your new priorities don't fit with the culture that you're in, which is a culture of really exhausting the self, a culture of overworking, a culture of, working late, a culture of getting out of balance. This will cause you, in the long run, and probably even in the short run, to fail. And so that's not worth it. You have to change your priorities, and if you get penalized for it by other people who are having priorities that are actually in the long run not good, then you have to take those penalties, because in the long run you will be doing yourself a favor.
Yes, so Denise, how does God help somebody in that situation who's not only low on energy but is continually losing the energy that he or she has?
One of the specialities of God is a giver of patience. So patience is a kind of a commodity that you can actually get from God.
Really?
So, yes.
How on earth do you give someone patience?
This is the speciality of a powerful soul, that you can transfer your power, you can transfer your virtues from yourself to someone who needs that. And of course God is the most powerful. For example, when somebody is very ill, God will transfer patience to that person who's ill, so they have the patience to get through a long illness and get through to a point where they get their health back again, because then you won't give up. You see. And if God can do that, and you are a student of God and a child of God, then the implication is that if you model yourself on God, then you ought to be able to accumulate enough to be able to distribute to other people. And so that is a very good thing to explore. How do I accumulate power, accumulate virtues in such a way that other people can actually receive them? That's a very good kind of charity or cooperation to give to someone.
Virtues. Impatience is a quality that doesn't really exist by itself. It has other sibling vices. What comes to mind, looking at my own experience, is when you're impatient, irritability comes with it. In its mild form, it's irritability. In its worst form, it's rage. Then there are other weaknesses that come with it. How do you manage not just impatience, but your other, their friends? It's like impatience and his big brother rage come to the party. How do you handle that? Because it's a question of managing your entire dark side. Sister Denise, what comes to mind is that impatient seems to be a door to almost every one of your weaknesses. It seems to be that back door in which all your vices can creep through. So keeping the door closed, tell us how you have pulled this off.
Well, you go back to the very basic thing, which is it is my responsibility to make sure that on a daily basis I fill myself with enough power to be able to get through that day successfully, and a little bit more too, because you always want to accumulate more than you're expending. Otherwise, you're not getting any richer. You know, spiritual power, spiritual qualities are assets. And so if you're experiencing impatience, rage and all of that, then what that tells you is you're weak. You're very weak. Do something about it. Stop what you're doing and start doing what you need to do. Because, you know, in life there are always sort of unexpected challenges which require extra energy, extra inner power. And if we haven't accumulated sufficient to be able to bring forward that extra as and when it suddenly is required, it means we haven't understood the meaning of doing a spiritual practice and accumulating.
What is the self-talk like to somebody who is trying to hold the reins on themselves so that they don't fall into negative behavior pattern brought on by impatience? Is your self-talk different?
You see, when you are clenching your fists and trying to force yourself to a certain state, this is when you're applying that, it's like you can say physical energy. And in spiritual practice we're taught that that's not the best way to do that, because you are you're actually draining your energy more by doing that, and in the long run it's counterproductive.
So sorry to interrupt you, spirituality means not using any force at all, even the force required to not fall off the wagon, as it were?
Yeah, because this force is always weaker than the thing you're pitting it against. Always.
Sure, that's very powerful.
And so
not many people know that, Sister Denise, because if you're impatient and you know you're about to do something stupid or say something stupid, if your self-talk is of a critical kind and you say to yourself, shut up, don't say anything, just don't say anything, that's the use of force, and you are saying that that's counterproductive.
Well, yes, because, you know, someone will notice.
Yeah.
Can't hide it.
So suppressing your impatience may temporarily be fine, but it's not fine in the long run.
And not even temporarily. You see, the impatience is there because you're weak.
Yeah.
You suppress it, that means you increase the weakness. That means you have less and less ability to manage the feelings. So you have to do something different. Postpone the situation, take a break, you know, taking a meditation break, even of 5-10 minutes, can make all the difference between losing your cool and maintaining what we call your stage, you see. Because you can have a meditation break which is like, you know, have a cup of tea, refresh yourself.
Or chocolate.
Or chocolate.
Okay.
But no, you need to make sure that you organize your life in such a way that you are sensible about it. I mean, if you set an agenda that is more than you can do, you're going to be weakening yourself. So it's not good to try and do the maximum. You need to go for the optimum, you know. And the optimum is what you can do comfortably, not what you can do under duress, you see, because you can't keep that up, and you get past the point of diminishing returns. Optimum is at the point just before you get into diminishing returns. So when you push yourself past that point, which you can, no doubt, but the law of diminishing returns sets in, and then it starts to take its toll, and you have to have the wisdom to understand that in advance and not put yourself in that situation.
Okay, it seems that you're describing a personality that's extremely strong enough to withstand one's own weaknesses. That takes, well, in this context, superhuman strength if you have the weakness of impatience.
Well, you know, the human condition means weaknesses. So if you are going to work with building up your strengths and managing your weaknesses, you're superhuman right there.
Explain to us what you mean by the law of diminishing returns in this context.
You have a certain amount of energy.
Mm-hmm.
You apply that energy to getting something done, accomplishing something, whatever. And you set yourself a certain goal, which requires a certain amount of time, energy, vigor, etc. Now, you have to make a calculation about what is your available energy. But sometimes, you know, your eyes may be bigger than your stomach, as it were, and you say to yourself, well, I have X amount of energy. But you're lying to yourself. You don't have that much. You have X amount of energy when you really push yourself, but that means that you are using up your reserves. And so then you're really in danger when you use up your reserves, because all of a sudden you'll conk out. So the law of diminishing returns is when you start using your reserves and it takes you more energy, more time, more effort, and you get less benefit, less results. So it becomes a big expenditure for very little benefit. Optimum, on the other hand, is where you have found that point where you get the maximum return for the amount of energy that you want to put in before it starts becoming more energy for less return. You see, there's this point, and that we call optimum. And diminishing returns comes when you go past that.
I see it's time to say toodle-doo to you. Do you want to leave the viewers with any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Well, patience is something that you can draw from God. It's really like an energy or a commodity. You have to be patient with yourself, patient with your people, patient and generous. You know, it's a very, very good virtue, and it makes all the difference between sustaining a relationship and breaking that relationship. And relationships are very, very important in life.
Okay, thank you. So, there you have it. If you are an impatient person, welcome to the millions of us who are and who fail miserably in that regard. Sister Denise has shared that if you have the weakness of impatience, impatience is not your problem, but it's a lack of spiritual power that causes you to become impatient in the first place. And she said we need to ensure that throughout the day that you're accumulating enough spiritual power to overcome the weakness of impatience as well as all other weaknesses. So as usual, things are not as they seem, and one has to do the work oneself. This is not something that you can delegate. Thank you so much for joining us, and we do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.